All right, great. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Michelle Williams. I'm a health educator, and today we are talking. There's a couple of different topics for eating with the seasons, and this one is specifically about our pantries. And as you are aware, the pantry is usually a place where a lot of less than healthy items hide or are readily available. So hopefully, we'll be able to guide you through some choices that make snacking a little healthier and filling your pantry with things that can be useful for good health choices. So thank you again. So we'll go ahead and get. All right, so of course, if we're trying to make healthier choices, it's really about what we fill our kitchen with, right? So you can go to the grocery store and you can buy thousands and thousands of items that are, low in nutrients, high in salt, high in sugar, high in saturated fat, or you can choose things that are healthier choices. So a lot of it is about, as with everything, it's about your choice. And while sometimes when we're at the grocery store, it's kind of like overwhelming because the average grocery store has 45,000 items to choose from. But if we can start with, making healthier choices, and part of that is smarter shopping. So one of the things that I talk to a lot of our clients about is, taking one type of food at a time. So it's like, okay, this week when I go to the grocery store, I'm going to look at all the yogurts and I'm going to see which ones actually have the highest amount of vitamin D and calcium and protein and the lowest amount of sugar. And then the next week I might look at breads, and then the next week I might look at cereals and so on and so forth, so that it's not so overwhelming. We want to eliminate things with excessive calories. So at the end of the day, we want to try to get most of our calories from foods that have lots of protein, lots of fiber, and vitamins and minerals, and not so much of those three S's: sugar, salt, saturated fat. We also know that, of course, we can save money on bulk food. So I belong to Costco, people belong to Sam's, BJ's, other types of those big box stores. And a lot of people will say, oh, I can't possibly finish all that stuff. But with most of the items that are pantry-esque, they're either in cans or they're in sealed bags, or you can get chip clips. So there are ways to keep these things from going bad, and you do save a lot of money. And of course, with food being as expensive as it is, this is a great option. And at the end of the day, if we can find things that are easier to cook in a variety of ways, of course, it takes less time for meal prep overall. Because if we don't have something, then we have to try to figure out how to make it and make some changes fast. So some essentials that every pantry, should have at least, and we kind of said pantry slash maybe like a cabinet. It depends on how you do your kitchen, but most of the time we're looking at having a couple of different choices of oils and vinegars, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Some condiments, herbs and spices are absolutely very important. America overall is a very salt and pepper happy place, but there are, hundreds of different of herbs and spices that give us flavor without giving us the sodium. So just something to sort of think about. And in addition to that, many herbs and spices actually do have health benefits, either because they are anti-inflammatory or because they help a particular cell take in nutrients better, or they cure gut health, or all sorts of other things. So there's a lot of health benefits to using those as well. Certain sweeteners are okay, and again, we're going to talk about all of these more at length, but grains, cereals, flours, beans, nut seeds, nut oils, canned and obviously not frozen things here, but fruits, proteins, dried fruits, and snacks. And yes, I saw your comment about turmeric. Turmeric is a wonder as far as anti-inflammatory, and there are lots of herbs and spices that fall into that category. So if you're ever interested, go on to your favorite search engine and type anti-inflammatory foods. There's even a whole diet related to it called the AIP diet, I believe, anti-inflammatory protocol diet. So there's lots of things that you can put into your body that can help with some of the inflammation that we have too much of, pretty much. Okay. So if we're going to do a pantry makeover, I look at this picture and I say, gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if your pantry looked like that? However, if you're like most people, you have sort of just a basic pantry. So first thing, is to go through and see what you have in there, right? If a food has, more than 15 or 20% in any of those three S's, sugar, salt, saturated fat. Now, of course, sugar doesn't have a percentage because we don't need any to survive, right? So it doesn't have a percentage the same way. But if you see things like that, those are foods that should be eaten in limited quantities. So, trying to find foods that don't have much nutrient value, or they don't have any vitamins, or they have high in one of those three categories. The second thing is to think about things that you enjoy. What tastes good to you? What feels good in your mouth? What is easy? Those types of things, so that it's like I can choose from here, here, and here for my snack. And then really try to greatly reduce those things that are processed or have food coloring or have preservatives. That's kind of step three along the road here. I do like to talk a little bit about food labels because I think it's important for people to understand some basics about food labels. Keep in mind that the food label did change finally after 10 years of fighting over it to look like what you see here on the picture. So a couple things to point out. First and foremost, the serving size matters, right? Many companies, what they do is they reduce the serving size so that all of the other numbers go down. As an example, a single serving of cereal is 1 cup, right? So that's like this big. And as we all probably aware, nobody eats 1 cup of cereal. So if you're eating cereal, usually it's two, maybe more if you're like my teenage son. And so if something has 5 grams per serving of, say, sugar, and you're eating two or three, then you're talking about 10 or 15 grams of sugar. So it's important to sort of make those measurement changes in your head and recognize that companies, generally speaking, especially the big food companies like, Post and Kraft, etc., really want to make the items look healthier than they actually are. So they do a lot of manipulation on serving size. The next thing that you want to notice is the different types of fat. So you will have total fat, which is, just all of the fat together. And then you have separated out saturated and trans fat. And the reason that's important is because of unsaturated fat is good for us. We need it. It does a lot of things for our body, but we do not need any trans fat, and we need very little, 10 to 12 grams of saturated fat. And we don't even really need that. If we got all of our fats in unsaturated, we'd be fine, right? But the idea is to limit that saturated fat. You also want to look at sugars because that is really a big area of concern for people. We're seeing prediabetes getting diagnosed in younger and younger ages. And it's really related to how much sugar we're having. So take a look at the nutrition labels of the foods that you're eating and look for ingredients that have higher amounts of vitamins and minerals and lower amounts of those three S's, saturated fat, sugar, and sodium. These are some empty calorie culprits. So we talk about these as foods that sort of give us nothing, right? It gives us calories and maybe sugar, salt, saturated fat, but really nothing of value. So, if you're going in your pantry and you see a lot of pre-made cakes or pre-made muffins or candies, chocolates, snack cake type things, cereal bars, uh, you know, um, things with lots of added fats like mayonnaise and microwave popcorn, crackers, cookies, pies, packaged muffins. These types of things really add a lot of negative and don't really give us a lot of positive. So we're trying to, make it so that if our foods have some of those negative things in them, they also have so much of the positive that you can kind of like balance it out, right? So think about things that you can change for yourself. Are you okay with having light mayonnaise instead of whole regular mayonnaise? Are you okay with diet soda versus regular soda? I'll tell you, I really think that either soda is not great, and actually that diet soda probably is almost worse for you. But again, that research is really hard to figure out. So, you know, having if you like one of these types of drinks, then just having them in limited amounts. Are you happy and satisfied with a high fiber cereal? Because, at the end of the day, most cereals are made from enriched wheat flour. They have a ton of sugar in them. They're not really that great. There are some that are better than others. And so really looking for ones that are less than 5 or maybe 6 or 7 grams of sugar per serving. Replace items with 3 to 5 grams of sugar is really the idea because again, if we're having 5 or 6 or 7 servings of something across our whole day, this adds up to 20, 25, 30, and more grams of sugar pretty easily, right? Can you eliminate or reduce foods with little or no protein or fiber? I mean, we say that to our clients a lot. It's like, you really want to, we don't need 300 grams of protein, right? But, we want enough protein so that we're balancing out our fats and our carbs and we're giving our muscles and our body what it needs, but we also want to have plenty of fiber. Fiber is something that almost all of us, myself included, do not get enough of. So, the idea is 25 to 35 grams per day, and most people are closer to like the 6 to 8 grams per day, and that's really playing a role, I think, in insulin resistance and how much people eat and not feeling satisfied and so on and so forth. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the oils and vinegar. As you are probably aware, it seems like an entire aisle of choices for these. But these are some of the better oils, right? So olive oil is great, but it really should only be used for cold or very lukewarm foods, anything under 300 degrees. Avocado oil, coconut oil, flaxseed oil, you can see all these listed here. As far as the vinegars, I mean, you can't go wrong. The only vinegar I would say to use in um, smaller quantities would be anything that is a reduced or glazed balsamic type vinegar. So not the one that you see here, but the one that's more syrupy. And then as far as don'ts, we know that palm oil is pretty bad for us, and that is in a lot of things. So just the other day, I was looking at the nuts that I just love, and what's the first oil? Palm oil. So I've downloaded this app a couple years ago called Yuka. It's Yuka, and I think it's got a picture of a carrot on it, and it's awesome because you can basically take your phone, you can scan the UPC code of any product, and it will give you sort of red, yellow, green notation and then why, and it's really helpful. So if you're interested in learning a little more about what you're eating, that might be a helpful tool. Anything that's partially hydrogenated, if you see the word hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated, these are oils we want to stay away from. Those are technically what's called trans fats, and they not only reduce your good cholesterol, but they also increase your bad cholesterol. So we want to stay away from those as much as possible. Soybean shortening, grapeseed oil, a lot of those types are all ones that we want to have limited amounts of. So try to focus your efforts on the do's. With our condiments, of course, the biggest thing to really think about with condiments is sugar. I mean, the difference between ketchup here and ketchup in other countries is the taste of it. I mean, the taste of ketchup is so different in our typical ketchup here because it has a lot of sugar. Mayonnaise has a lot of added fats and trans fats sometimes. Things like soy sauce and miso and teriyaki have high salt content. So just sort of looking at what you're eating and then recognizing what the serving size is and noticing how much you put on your food. So, 1 tablespoon of X product is 14 grams, 1 teaspoon of X product is 4 grams, just so that you have some concepts in your head. We really want to think about trying to find items that are not with added sugar and have a reduced fat content. And be careful because sometimes things will say, lower fat, and all that means is they've taken the fat out of the product and put a bunch of sugar in it so that it's really no more healthy. So try not to use things that have more than 140, when you're talking about condiments, over 140 milligrams of sodium, more than 5 grams of sugar, or more than 6 to 10 grams of total fat. And certainly if you see high fructose corn syrup, although I think a lot of companies have finally started taking that out of their food after people just stopped buying those products, right? Okay, so some herbs and spices. There are lots of different ones to choose from. Again, you have a huge, like a half an aisle worth, right? So I encourage you to try different types of spices so that you can begin to use things that are not just salt and pepper. The Mrs. Dash brand is all salt-free, so they're a good choice, especially for people who have pre-hypertension or have heart disease risk factors. If you are looking at your spices, some things to just think about. We don't want to have added gluten or cornstarch or added sugar or monosodium glutamate, dextrose or maltodextrin, because those things together tend to cause some inflammatory properties. Not always, it sort of depends on the person, but trying to find versions of these things that don't have all of that is probably a good idea. When we think about our sweeteners, there's again a lot of choice, and I think that's really the area where most people struggle, is that it's like overwhelming to say like, oh my God, there's 17 million different choices here. And on top of that, a lot of times you'll see research that says, oh, you definitely shouldn't have that. And then you see research that shows that X is fine. And so what we say to most people is, you really got to do your own research and figure out what you think will work best. Um, Everything in moderation, right? So we don't really want to have any of these like really fake sugars like aspartame, sucralose, high fructose corn syrup, refined white sugar. But even on the left side, stevia, agave, honey, I mean, too much of these things, it also causes issues, right? So the idea is we use as natural as possible. We use unrefined. Anything that has a white sugar in it is a refined sugar. So, a lot of people have switched to using sugar alcohols, which seem to be okay, although they haven't been out for 20 years to study. The one thing that we do know is that about half of people find that they get stomach upset when they eat products that have sugar alcohols in them. So just sort of pay attention to how your digestion feels after you eat those types of foods. When we think about all the different choices for grains, flours, cereals, and beans, there's a lot, right? So, whole grains are always best. When we start to refine grains, like enriched wheat flour, you might see, essentially these are flours that where they've taken all the like good stuff out of it and processed it so that it's easier to process, and then they add things back into it. Unfortunately, for many of those, it's very little fiber, which is why, for the most part, when you buy a loaf of bread, it is almost impossible to find bread that has more than 2 or 3 grams of fiber, which is very different than how it used to be. So, look for things that are whole grains. When you're talking about your beans, try to rinse them off, especially if they come from a can, because typically companies use sodium as a way to preserve the beans in the can. Um, Look for cereals that have less than 5 grams of sugar per serving, and try to fill your pantry with different choices. I mean, you can see there's about 20 different grains here. We've got about 10 or 12 different types of beans. There are nut flours, grain flours, other types of things. You can see some cereals down here that are better than, of course, things like Fruit Loops and whatnot. And one of the things I will say, I do have 2 kids, and sometimes it's hard to make those choices, but I can tell you right now that if children are eating the amount of sugar that most of them are, 40, 50 grams a day, they are going to be pre-diabetic at some point in their life, most likely. So it's really something that even if they complain, oh, I hate it, they will eat when they're hungry enough. And so if we can start to remove things that have these excessive amounts of sugar or food colorings or preservatives from their lives, it's probably going to be a long-term better situation for them. So as far as sort of nuts and seeds and nut butters, understand that seeds have a high amount of fiber and protein for what they are. So thinking about, you know, um, chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, you can see all the different kinds here. They have an extraordinary amount of fiber. So even if you just take a spoonful, add them to your yogurt, take a spoonful, add them to your soup, whatever it is that you want to do, you're just increasing that amount of fiber with like almost no calories. So it's not really gonna, we call it sort of a net zero caloric food because it has all this great stuff in it, but it doesn't have all of the other stuff. So, there's lots of different nuts. Some of them have better health qualities than others. I would say peanuts are probably your lowest uh, healthy nut, but hazelnut, Brazil nut, walnuts, lots of information about the health benefits to those. And then, some of the other ones, not as much, but still a better choice than, say, a Little Debbie donut or whatever. So think about looking at the food labels, trying to make sure that it has something that is valuable to your health in it, and make the ingredient list as short as possible because when you get these items that have 10, 15, 25 ingredients, at least half of them are chemically compounded items that you're then putting in your body. So, paying attention to palm oil, the partially and regular hydrogenated oils, the added sugar. You can make your own nut butters. You can make your own stevia if you're so interested. There's lots of recipes online for those. So if there's something that you really enjoy, but the only one you can find has all of these added ingredients, see if there's a version that you can make for yourself. When we're talking about canned and jarred foods, at the end of the day, this is a nice way to save food. Now, this person looks like they're prepping for the apocalypse here, but one of the things to remember is that when we can or jar foods, many times we're heating them at very high temperatures, and so a lot of those foods don't have the same vitamins that we think they do based on what we see online, right? So the more we cook things, nutrients tend to seep out of them. So usually what we say is, raw is best, right? And if you cook them, the less you cook it the better. When something is fully cooked, it has lost between 40 and 60% of its nutrient sort of base. There's lots of things you can buy this way though, like tomatoes and carrots, green beans, tuna, chicken, beets. I mean, you name it. So it just sort of depends on the person's desire and how they like them, right? Like for me, I could never eat canned green beans. I never ate them as a kid, and to me, they're just so soft. I like my green beans to be very crunchy and crisp. I could even eat them raw. But beets and beans and dried foods are all good choices here. Many of them will have versions that are low or no sodium or no added sugar, or, look for things that are in natural juice or water versus like syrup. You'll see a lot of canned fruits that are in, syrup, which is essentially corn syrup. So really takes away every ounce of goodness that the fruit once had. Be really careful with that with like canned pineapple, mandarin oranges, any of those sort of like fruit cup things that you might put in your kid's lunchbox. Those are all pretty filled with syrupy type things. So I wanted to share a couple recipes of things you could make at home with items from your pantry. So first, you have some black bean veggie burgers. These are really simple to make. I mean, you're going to mix all of these items into a bowl with a couple of breadcrumbs and some eggs so that it holds it together, and then you just put them together in a burger, right? Walmart and Parmesan crusted chicken is, a little bit better than sort of, the breadcrumbs that you might typically buy, because walnuts, of course, have some of those really great health benefits, especially for brain health. With a pea soup, you can make an excellent pea soup with some split green peas and some yellow peas. While it takes a while for it to cook, the prep part of it doesn't take that long, and that's a really good high fiber, very filling and satisfying item, especially in the winter time. So that can be really helpful. We also have, oh, I'm sorry, I have a repeated recipe there. I apologize for that. We have a lemon kale risotto, so pretty easy. And again, it replaces some of those pre-made noodly rice things because a lot of those, like the Knorr sides and the Kraft sides, etc., of course they are easy to make. I totally understand, but at the same time, they virtually have nothing in them but enriched wheat flour, sodium, and possibly some sugar. So, trying to make some of these things on your own it doesn't take too long. And one of the things we tell people a lot is, if you're going to make this lemon kale risotto, you can just make enough for 3 or 4 dinners so that only have to make it once, but you can eat off of it for several days. With chili, same thing. It only takes about 15 minutes to make chili, It just has to sit on the stove for a little bit and sort of cook itself. But you're getting lots of beans, and if you use ground turkey, you have lower saturated fat, and you're getting the tomato and all of these special spices that have some health um, benefits to them. So all in all, it's a great meal. And then I wanted to share one other recipe that I make a lot. I do a quinoa kale salad. So I'm sorry, that's what I meant to put in the middle here. But this one is you cook the quinoa and then you chop up kale real small. And then you do celery, apple, cran raisins or cranberries, and then mix it all together with the quinoa, and then you do like a dressing. And so we make our own dressings at our house. So and again, these things don't take longer than 45 seconds. So a nice dressing for this particular salad is taking 3 parts olive oil, 1 part honey, um, a little bit of brown sugar, and a little bit of soy sauce. Mix it together and pour it on top of that salad, and it is very delicious. So lots of different things that you can do to spruce up your health and use things from your pantry. I do see that I have one question here. Mrs. Dunster's sliced bread has a good rating in the Yuka app. Awesome. So there is somebody that's using the Yuka app already. It's really helpful and it's also free. So something important to know, and it is very helpful. Although I would say that sometimes I find things that I've been eating forever and it's a red and I'm like, oh, now I can't eat it as much. So sometimes too much information is more. But anyway, thank you so much for attending today. I hope that I was able to provide you with some information that you didn't have before, and I hope everyone's new year is starting off well. If anybody has any questions, I am happy to answer them now.